To noted Austrian economist and eventual Nobel Prize winner Friedrich von Hayek, these are ominous signs. In the spring of 1947, he invites an elite group of economists, political scientists, historians, and other intellectuals, including Milton Friedman, to consider the consequences. They call themselves the Mount Pelerin Society for the Swiss town where they held their first meeting.
So far as I personally was concerned, it was a very thrilling meeting. It was the first time I was overseas, the first time I ever met economists, political scientists, and others from other countries around the world. And it was organized because as of that time, the number of people around the world who were firm supporters of liberty, of a classical liberal point of view about human society, were very few and far between, and were beleaguered wherever they were as a small minority.
He came on the scene with what were perceived to be radical ideas in the 1950s and the 1960s, largely because the influence of John Maynard Keynes was about fully pervasive, if I may put it that way.
Chicago economists were not popular in those days, and Milton Friedman led that group in not being popular. But we felt we had something to say because of what we learned, and it was exhilarating. We were warriors in combat with most of the rest of the profession.
Milton and the others would continue to meet, yet for decades to come, they would be considered a minority. By the 1950s, the Friedman family had been drawn back to the hills of New England, where Milton would further develop some of his most important economic theories. The Dartmouth College Library in nearby Hanover served as Milton's research base. For more than 30 years, New England would be their summer home.
I always used to say, you fly over Maine, New Hampshire, or Vermont, any place you drop a rock is a nice place to spend the summer.
For the first few years, there is the hideaway at Orford, New Hampshire.
It was totally isolated. We got to it on 3 or 4 miles of dirt road. We didn't have a telephone. I think my parents got a telephone when I got my driver's license.
They built their dream house overlooking Lake Fairley in Vermont. It was called Capitaph, after their classic book, Capitalism and Freedom, in which Milton presented his economic philosophy for the first time.
It was an important book because it opened the eyes of hundreds of thousands of readers and millions ultimately to that we were doing things wrong in so many different public policy areas, and that by analyzing it simply but deeply, one could not only show why it was wrong, but come up with improvements. So Friedman was never content simply to show that something was not working well. He usually came up with ingenious ways to improve it.
Some of Milton's most important thinking is done when work and play can be combined. His scientific focus is always technical economics, predicting the consequences of public policies. Milton's landmark scientific work, A Theory of the Consumption Function, is published in 1957. It will be one of the reasons why, much later, he will win the Nobel Prize in Economics.
Milton already had lost confidence in Keynesian economics and was beginning a counter-revolution through monetarism and a variety of other criticisms of Keynesian economics.
Traditional Keynesian theory relies on the belief that enough government spending can create jobs and trigger spending on goods and services. This, in turn, will create more jobs. But Milton argues that people don't make their spending decisions based on current income or short infusions of cash. They make decisions based on what is called permanent income, what they think they are likely to make over time. Today, Milton's theory is widely accepted. The Years in New England also produce A Monetary History of the United States, published in 1963 with his colleague Anna Schwartz. Most consider this Milton's most influential work.
There were great debates at different conferences about, what were these crazy people saying? I mean, it just wasn't believable.
It was commonly believed that the Great Depression was caused by the failure of capitalism. Milton argues that the cause was a failure of the Federal Reserve.
The crucial date, in my opinion, with respect to the Depression, is not the stock market crash, not Black Thursday. It's December 11th, 1930. That was the day on which the Bank of the United States in New York crashed, the biggest bank failure in the history of the United States. It was the occasion on which you needed the Federal Reserve System to come in and restore confidence, flood the country with liquidity, prevent other banks from failing. It did nothing of the kind.
He was, considered an oddball in the profession, and his ideas were ridiculed by many people as being way out, as just supporting, the status quo, supporting big business. I'm sure it was very difficult on him personally and his wife, Rose.
One of those who publicly disagreed with Milton Friedman was John Kenneth Galbraith, President Roosevelt's price czar during World War II, and later, President John Kennedy's ambassador to India.
Mr. Galbraith, would you tell us how you see our economy?
Well, as how I see it as a control problem, I see it essentially as a problem of responsible action in which, indeed, there is no perfect solution. Wage and price control are an indispensable part of any economic policy that this country can have, and we certainly, I hope, will not again pay attention to the people who are offering us this dream of the free market.
A professor at Harvard University, and decidedly Keynesian, he was one of the most popular economists of the day.
Yeah, well, one has to understand that Professor Friedman would blame everything from the First World War to the invasions of Genghis Khan on monetary policy, and would use monetary policy as a cure for both. He's a one-cause, one-cure man.
Richard Parker is an economist at Harvard and Galbraith's biographer.
I think Galbraith looked on the Chicago Economics Department and Friedman and the like with bemusement. I mean, I think that he felt that they were part of economics' past, not its future.
Thank you.
What Friedman had to offer, as far as Galbraith was concerned, was some of the finest thinking of the 18th century. And it didn't seem terribly relevant to the 20th.
I think what helped Friedman get through this well were two personal characteristics that were very important. One, he's a tremendous optimist. The second one was his analysis was so clear and straightforward and simple that he believed that he was right on most of these issues and that the profession just hadn't analyzed them sufficiently.
Milton and Rose are first and foremost teachers. One of their most original ideas had everything to do with the power of choice in education.
The full exercise of choice would invigorate the public school system, would improve it. Why? Competition always has that effect. It's a disgrace of the nation, in my opinion, that you should have the inner cities, which are the kind of hells that they now are. Living conditions are deplorable. There's no safety, there's no security, there's no protection. The schools in those areas turn out kids who can't read, who can't write, who can't figure. They have no economic future.